Welcome back, once again adventurers, to Let's Play ChäoS Child. In the last episode, Takuru and Hinae went on an outing, not a date, in the heart of Shibuya, basically to get Takuru that replacement phone that he's been needing for quite some time. But the day did turn into something else, with Takuru surprisingly enjoying himself, and Hinae actually reflecting on how she actually found it relaxing being with Takuru. But shortly after they parted ways, Hinae was, well, unexpectedly attacked by someone that attempted to push her down a flight of stairs, and during which I should say, Hinae was also reminiscing about how the bond between her and her family was slowly falling apart and then shattering completely. Although that story is still unfolding. Meanwhile, it's a brand new day over at Hekiho Academy. By the time the week was over, the return of the new generation madness was forgotten, and everyone was talking about some counterfeit food labeling that had happened last week. The criminals had taken advantage of the computer problems caused by the crash of 15, which made it a hot topic. Of course, Ad Channel was still talking about it, but it had started to die down. In fact, since the media hadn't reported anything about her, the message board had a new set of theories about Rico Haida, and that was mostly what they was talking about now. Time passed whether we wanted it to or not, and we students still had to go to school, because that's just how life goes. Yep, another dull, boring, uneventful day.
Oh, Miyashiro!
And it's Shinji.
なんだ、人か。
なんだとは朝から随分とご挨拶じゃねえか。つうかさっきから何やってんだこんなところで。
何って、学校に来たらここを取るのは当然だろ。当たり前のこと言うなよ。
そうか？それにしてはさっきからここでキョロキョロしてたじゃんか。誰か待ってでもいんのかと思ってさ。
I hadn't even been thinking about Ito, so I didn't notice him until he'd spoken to me. If I'd had seen him, I would have gone into the school building.
で、誰を待ってんだ？
それは、ほら、お前を待ってたんだよ。
俺を？もしかして例の事件で何か進展があったのか？
いや、そういうわけじゃないけど。
じゃあなんで？有村だ。
え？
I turned around and saw Arimura right behind me.
よう、有村。
伊藤先輩。
有村、ChäoS。
どうも、宮代先輩。
Yeah, it's hard for someone of Hinae's personality to be chipper after she was literally pushed down a flight of stairs. I raised my hand like an idiot. The morning autumn wind felt cold against it. Huh? I forced myself to match her greeting. Why was she being so cold? Yeah, being attacked in a street tends to do that.
お前どうしたんだその手。
I looked at her hand and saw that there was a bandage wrapped around it just under her sleeve.
これはちょっと階段でつまずいちゃって。
I looked closer and saw that she was concealing some purple bruises with foundation.
それじゃあ私はこれで。
Arimura seemed a little out of it as she said goodbye and headed into the school building.
なんだよ。相変わらず愛想ねえな。と、それより話ってなんだ？
は？
だから、なんか話があって待ってたんだろ？
僕がこんなところでわざわざ伊藤を待つわけないだろ。
は？なんだそれ。
ほら、それより早く行かないとチャイム鳴るぞ。
なんなんだよ、一体。
Yeah, I think we've just seen the demonstration of just how lies work. That was my question. She'd been smiling when I said goodbye yesterday, and now she was acting like this. In my head,
遅いな、有村。うわ、なんだ？
誰だ？
この声は有村だな。
なんでわかっちゃうんですか？つまんない。
そりゃわかるだろ。
そっか、わかっちゃうのか。
有村。
そうだ先輩、チャオス。
チャオス。
well, that's how it would have gone if Arimura hadn't been pushed down a flight of stairs. That's how it was supposed to go. Nothing negative was supposed to happen, and yet it happened anyway. Instead, she'd acted like that.
女子ってわからないな。
And lo and behold, we run into Kurusu. I almost leapt up when I heard a sudden yell.
どうしたのタクル？
なんだクールスか。驚かすなよ。
First Ito,
驚いたのは
now
こっ
you.
ちよ。あなた、今なんて言ったの？
Oh no, I must have been talking to myself. That you were.
いや、今のは何でも。
いたいた、タク
And Serica. I felt a bad premonition. Serica's timing was a little too perfect. Yeah. Much too perfect for my liking.
そうだ、ちょっと用事が。
ねえねえ、昨日ひなちゃんとデートしたんだって？
You heard wrong. You definitely heard
デー
wrong.
ト？ひなちゃんってもしかして有村さんのこと？タクル、あなた有村さんとデートしたの？
You bought a phone and ate some food. Crap. Now I had a real problem. No, forget that.
なんでそのことをお前が知ってるんだ？
それはだって見たんだもん。
You did
見
you?
たって一緒にいるところをか？
待ちなさいタクル。ということは本当に有村さんとデートしたのね。
And, Kurusu is extremely upset.
デートっていうか一緒に出かけただけだよ。
だからそれってデートでしょ？
This was awkward. Even if we weren't related by blood, who knew that having your family find out about your dating life would feel so awkward?
それでどうだったの？どんな服で行ったの？どこへ行ったの？何をしたの？うまくいったの？
Is that, an I'm happy that things went so well for you smile? Or is that, I'm going to butcher you cruelly in your sleep kind of smile? I'm, kind of, yeah. I'm tempted to say that it's the latter smile.
どうどう、のんちゃん落ち着いて落ち着いて。
だってあのタクルが女の子とデートよ。姉としては気になるじゃない。第一それってあんな陰惨なニュースを追っているよりも全然いいことよ。セリカもそう思わない？
私はタクがそれでいいなら。
What was going on here? Good question. I knew that girls like to talk about romance, but I didn't think they'd like to talk about it this much.
それでタクルどうなの？
どうって別にちょっと遊びに行っただけだし。
ちょっとってダメよ、そんな適当な態度じゃ有村さんにも失礼じゃない。
Neither Serica nor I were sure how to handle Kurusu's excitement. And then suddenly she spun around.
ああそうだ、こうしちゃいられないわ。
クルス、どこ行くつもりだ？
決まってるでしょ、有村さんのところよ。弟をよろしくってきちんと挨拶しておかなきゃ。
ちょっと待って、いくらなんでもそれ早まりすぎだ。
You're taking this whole thing way too seriously.
そうだよのんちゃん、そういうのはちゃんと日取りを選んでやんなきゃ。
That's not right either.
とにかく有村とはスマホを買いに行くついでにちょっと一緒にブラブラしただけなんだよ。
本当に？
Sorry to
本当
burst
だ
your
って。だ
hopes.
から変な気を回したりとか頼むからやめてくれ。
そう。
And thus her dreams were shattered. Why did she look so disappointed?
っていうかのんちゃん、なんでそんなに必死なの？
Serica? Why? Why must you make things worse? Yeah, I think it's time to transfer to a new school, Takuru. Or better yet, transfer out of Shibuya altogether.
だってそういう楽しいことがあればタクルだってもう変な事件を追いかけたりしなくなるかもしれないでしょ。
Ah, not the reaction that I was anticipating, that's for sure. Because if Shinji Ito had asked that very same question, Kurusu would have almost certainly pummeled him to death with her bare fists.
なんだそんな理由か。
もちろんそれだけじゃないわ。もっとちゃんとした理由があるわよ。
And what better reason would that be, pray tell?
ちゃんとした理由って？
それはほら有村さんも私たちと似たような境遇だから。
似たようなってどういうことだ？
知らないの？彼女ご両親はご健在らしいんだけどね。住んでいたお部屋が渋谷地震で倒壊して、それでお兄さんが。
Yeah, it's as I thought. Shingo Arimura perished during the Shibuya earthquake. The one that was friends with Kakita.
今はご両親とも東京から少し離れてしまって、彼女自身は近くの親戚のお家から通っているらしいんだけどね。でも有村さんと同じ小学校だったって子に聞いたんだけど、彼女すごくお兄さん子だったらしくて、それで亡くなった後はずっと塞ぎ込んでいたそうだから。
Indeed. Because Shingo was the only family member that Hinae felt she could still trust. I had no idea that Arimura had a past like that. Well, there is somebody else who knows about Hinae's past. And that person is none other than Hana Kazuki.
別に同情とかじゃないの。ただ彼女にも頑張ってほしいなって。だから。
She suddenly grabbed me by the hands and looked straight into my eyes.
もしも何か相談があったらいつでも言うのよ。わかった？
Here's hoping that said advice is not as terrible as that of Cool Cat Press.
うん。
Her demeanor was so overwhelming that I almost took a step back.
それからくれぐれもまたあの事件を追いかけたりなんてしようと思わないこと。いいわね。
わかったよ。
When I nodded, she smiled, satisfied, and finally left to go to class.
のんちゃんびっくりだね。
It's kind of the first time that you've ever admitted to that.
そもそもはお前が余計なこと言うからだろ。
あれ？そうだっけ？
Liar. Absolute liar.
そうだよ。
でもタク、本当にひなちゃんとは何にもないの？
ないよそんなの。
タク？
At least, not from what I'd seen this morning. That's right. It was stupid to get so excited just because I'd gone to hang out with a girl. We'd just gone shopping together. If I got excited and started obsessing over dating and girlfriends, I'd be no different than half of the idiots in this school, which, to be fair, Takuru, you already are. In many respects. I wasn't like those wrong-siders who spent every minute of the day thinking of girls. Says the person that continually buys Cool Cat Press magazines. I spent most of my day gathering information. Yeah, the wrong kind of information. And I felt bad for Kurusu, but I was starting to get a little bored with the situation. Everybody seemed to think that the arrest of Riko Haida meant that the case was winding down, but I couldn't be sure that it was over. If Haida was responsible for all the murders, then why did she have to kill all those people? And in such a fashion? Was it just because they were gigalomaniacs? Or was she working for some organization? And how had she killed them? Clearly not with her pyrokinesis. Yeah, why didn't she use her pyrokinesis? There were still tons of questions. I didn't have time to obsess over every little thing some girl did. And yet if you start pursuing the case again... which meant that I had some work to do. Yeah, work that will once again bring down the wrath of the Empress of Hekiho down upon your head. I had to go over the case again, which you specifically promised Kurusu that you wouldn't do. If I were the head of a journalism club, I needed to act like a journalist. But unfortunately it's not a journalist club, it's a newspaper club. Which isn't quite the same thing. Right. I opened the door to the club room, ready to get started.
Ah, ChäoS 先輩
And it's Hinae, who is in somewhat better spirits than she was earlier.
有村どうしてここに
決まってるじゃないですか。先輩を待ってたんですよ。ここに来れば会えるかなって。
僕に会いに
はい。
そう。
No. I just told myself that I didn't have time to waste on girls.
今朝はごめんなさい。ちょっと考え事してたせいでそっけなかったですよね。
そんなこと。
No, there was no point in lying to Arimura. Even though it was Shinji who said that.
そうですよね。でもちょっと理由があって。
理由？
言いましたよね。怪我したって。
Arimura rubbed the skin just above her knees and winced a little. He also tried to hide the fact. I could still see a bandage under her sleeve. It didn't look that bad, but maybe she was worse off than she looked.
階段でつまずいたんだっけ？大丈夫なんだよな。
No, she didn't trip or fall.
はい。怪我自体はそんなに大したことはないんですけど、ただ誰かに押されたような気がしてて。
Yeah, unfortunately she didn't see whoever it was that passed her by. But she knew enough to know that it was deliberate, not accidental.
押されたって、突き落とされたってことか？誰に？
までも気がしたって感じで、だからはっきりそうとは言えないんですけど。でもちょっと気になってて、それで朝は上の空になってたんです。だからごめんなさい。
Sort of dancing around the issue there, Hinae, but unfortunately if Takuru tries to push further, he'll be basically breaking his promise to Kurusu.
それで突き落とされた後は特に襲われたりとかしてないのか？
はい、転んで階段から落ちて見上げたら誰もいなくて。
そっか。
If someone did push her, then who? That is the question. Could it have been something to do with the case? But compared to the other cases, that would be pretty sloppy. Was it just chance then? Or maybe she'd been mistaken.
それじゃあ私はこれで。
Arimura picked up her bag and started to walk toward the door.
もう帰るのか？
はい、とにかく朝のこと一言謝りたかっただけですから。
そっか。
Yeah, well, to me it looked like you were more upset than rude.
先輩がいいって言うなら、もう少しいてもいいかな、なんて。
え？
ダメですか？
別にダメなことないけど。
本当ですか？よかった。
I think we're finally seeing a glimpse of Hinae's true personality at long last. It's a good sign. At least, means, well, things could have been a lot worse. I started to feel awkward. But it wasn't a bad awkward. It wasn't that bad at all. It was kind of nice.
そうだ、怪我。怪我大したことないって言ってたけど、本当か？
はい、大丈夫ですよ。ほら、この通り。
Arimura lifted up her skirt to show me.
もう先輩ったら、あんまり見ちゃダメですよ。
I knew that I should probably look away, but my instincts overcame my reason.
そんなこと言ったって。
I think he wanted you to show the injury on your arm, not your legs. Suddenly the door opened without warning. Of course it did. Can we say bad timing?
Huh?
Because this is very bad timing. Everything froze for a moment. Well, it could have been worse. Could have been Kurusu instead of Kazuki. Kazuki appeared for just a moment before she vanished. Looks like that bond has suddenly gone downhill as well. A moment later, I heard a furious pounding on the walls.
ああ、違うんだ、カズキ。
Yeah, very bad timing.
そうなの花、今のは違うの。
She is livid.
だから違うんだってば。
October 22nd. Four days had passed since someone had pushed Arimoto down the stairs and ran off. Nothing had changed for her since then. How were things between us? Well, maybe not too bad. Probably. And tomorrow was the 23rd, the day of the brain dead incident 6 years ago. I'd spent the whole day online looking for new information and found something interesting. It was the news that the burnt, headless body of a man had been found. Oh dear. Well,
本当に行くんですか？
this time it wasn't Rico herself who is the victim this time around. But looks like Takuru is going to break his promise to both Kurusu and Hinae not to pursue the case any further.
嫌なら無理に付き合ってくれとは言わないけど。
Arimoto's expression was clouded, but she shook her head. After school that day, we'd gone to visit none other than Kunosato. I wasn't very happy about the idea, but it was the best way to find out about the news I'd seen this morning. Of course, Detective Shinjo probably knew more about the case, but he worked for the police. Even if we'd been attacked by Haida earlier, he probably wouldn't be willing to give us the latest information. Neither, for that matter, would Mio Kunosato at this juncture as well. But Kunosato had built up a relationship of trust with the police. Not really. And it looked to me that between the two she had the upper hand in the relationship with Shinjo. That's because she's working with none other than Kunosato Momose of Frisia. Which meant that she might know something. Whether she'd tell is another matter, as I've just said.
じゃあ行くけど、本当にいいのか？
I asked Arimoto one last time before we went inside.
だってここ女の人の部屋ですよ。宮代先輩、そんなところに一人で行くつもりですか？
確かに女子が一緒の方が話は聞いてくれるだろうけどさ。
I didn't really like her either, and to be honest, I didn't want to rely on her help, but I had no choice if I wanted that information. And I really wasn't relying on her help. I was using her. And vice versa.
私が言ってるのはそういうことじゃなくて。
じゃあどういうことだ？
だからいいです。なんでもないです。
あ、おい、部屋の場所知らないんじゃないのか？
Arimoto stormed ahead of me, angrily. I followed her after her into the apartment building.
誰だ？
And lo and behold, she's home.
僕です。宮代拓。
入れ。
Well, first, thank you, and second, I'm surprised. Kunosato let us in much easier than I thought she would. I've been worried she would turn us away at the door, but I guess I've been wrong. You and me both.
散らかっているが気にするな。
Her room was still in terrible shape. I could see the Shibuya news screen on her PC. It looked like she was editing something.
例の焼死体のことだな。
And also, believe it or not, this is the first time we actually see Mio Kunosato in casual attire and not the lab coat. Which is a nice change, if only temporary. Kunosato spoke before we even had a chance.
どうしてそれを？
Isn't it obvious?
ギガロマニアックスのお二人がわざわざこんな手狭なところにいらっしゃってくださったんだ。他に考えられる心当たりはない。
相変わらず嫌味な人。
True, but she's not wrong.
ご想像の通り、昨べの焼死体について何か情報はないかと思って来たんです。
I'd say it was less of a suspicion and more of a deduction, really. There was no point in pissing her off if it meant we didn't get the information we needed. I quickly moved in between them. This wasn't really something I was good at, but I didn't have a choice.
どこまで知っている？
その一通り情報として出ていることは。
The location was a multi-purpose building in Hatsudai. The victim was a man between his mid-30s and late 50s. He'd been burned so badly his body had turned to ash, and the police had no idea who he was. They were working to ID him. So, again, different victim this time. That much had been announced this morning. I'd looked back over it just in case before I came here and nothing new had come out.
ならば、それが全てだ。それ以上のことは一切分かっていない。
それは箝口令が敷かれているってことですか？
いや、警察の方でもまだつかめていないようだ。どうやら先月の太陽嵐の影響でまたシステムが不安定になっているのだそうだ。被害者が渋谷以外の人間の場合、紹介も一苦労らしい。
Ah, so the victim is from outside.
システムにばかり頼りすぎると、こういうことになるという見本のようなものだな。
Since Arimura hadn't spoken up, what Kunosato said was probably true.
それで久里さんはこの事件どう見ます？
それはニュージェネの再来と関係があるかどうか聞いているのか？
Could very well be decapitated, set on fire.
まあそういうことです。
私にはその質問に答える義務はない。
Never implied that you did. I figured. I thought she might say that, so I didn't feel surprised or disappointed. But surprisingly, she asked me something instead. Yeah, she's looking to get information, not give it.
お前はどう思っている？
僕ですか？
お前もこれまでの事件を追ってきたのだろう。それならば一応の考えはあるはずだ。そいつを聞かせてみろ。
I hated to tell her just because she asked me, but there was no point in arguing. I decided to just tell her what I thought.
この事件にはこれまでのものと比べていくつかの相違点があります。まずは場所。
All the other incidents had taken place in Shibuya proper. Hatsudai was part of the Shibuya ward, but most people considered it a part of Shinjuku.
それから年齢の問題。
All the previous victims had been in their teens or early 20s. This time the victim was middle-aged. He was closer to Sakuma's generation than ours. Excuse me.
つまりこれまでの事件とは無関係だということか。
There is one more thing, one more point that's very telling, or rather the lack of said point, which is the sumo stickers. The previous 4 murders, the sumo stickers were a big part of it. Literally in the case of Watabi's murder. There has been no mention of the sumo stickers in this case whatsoever.
そう考えていいんじゃないかと。
But it's still a suspicious death, so it has to be looked into with care. The fact that the body had been burned to death made me think of Riko Haida. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And it is entirely possible that she probably broke out of police custody after all. Or not, it seems, but Haida was in police custody right now. She couldn't be responsible. And today was the 22nd. It was one day too early for the brain-dead case.
そこまで結論が出ているのならわざわざ私に聞く必要もないだろう。
じゃあ
そもそも今のところ30代以上でのギガロマニアックス発症例はない。ということは少なくとも被害者はギガロマニアックスではないということだ。
In other words,
偶然か便乗か。いずれにしてもこれまでの事件とは無関係だろうな。
But then again, considering that the return of the new generation madness was itself a copycat series from the original, or of the original new generation killings, we can't actually discount it either.
とりあえず関係ないってのは一安心だな。
嘘。
Yeah, nothing gets past you, eh, Hinae?
先輩、本当はもう少し事件が続いてくれてもよかったのにって思ってるじゃないですか。
Yeah, you walked right into that one. I hadn't realized it, but if Arimoto said so, then maybe I did. Maybe I wanted something to happen to break the boredom. Funny that.
私はまだ安心できません。だって。
Arimoto squirmed uneasily. It made sense. Just the other day, someone might have pushed her down the stairs, though there was no might have. Someone did push her down the stairs.
ごめん、そんなつもりじゃなかった。
いえ、私の方こそちょっと過敏になってるのかも。
送るよ。
ありがとうございます。
Arimura held my hand the whole way back. Her hand felt tiny and very frail. The next day was the 23rd. That was the day of the brain-dead incident 6 years ago. Nothing interesting happened in Shibuya that day, because we've changed things. November 6th, 2009, Friday. Another glimpse into Hinae Arimura's life. Hinae Arimura was in downtown Shibuya when it happened. Her brother's birthday was in a week. What should she get him for a present? She had taken the allowance she'd saved up over the last several months and had gone into the city alone. Every year, she and her brother would celebrate each other's birthdays, just the two of them. So Shingo was true to his word. The moment the two of them graduated, they both left their parents and their lives behind them and lived with each other in Shibuya. Hinae would give her brother a present, and he'd say thank you and give her something back, even though it wasn't her birthday, but it could be her unbirthday. It always made her so happy. What should she get him this year? She wanted to get him something he would keep forever. Something he could wear would be best. Clothes were outside of budget, and gloves or a muffler would only be useful in winter. What about a wallet? They were always useful. Just when she decided to go into a slightly grown-up department store, the huge earthquake struck Shibuya. It was the disaster they called the Shibuya earthquake, known to a select few as the Third Melt. And I didn't really remember the moment it happened, only what came after. 1 second there was a bright light that flooded her field of vision, and the next second everything had changed, and Shibuya was nothing more than a metal-ridden husk of its former self. The walls of the buildings had collapsed. The asphalt had split open, and here and there she could hear people moaning in pain. It was like something out of a dream or a nightmare. She didn't know what had happened. She quickly dialed her brother, but not only did he not pick up, she couldn't even hear it ring. Since she had nothing else to do, she decided to head for home. Only when she stood up that she realized she'd been hurt all over. Her knees were cut open. She'd hit her back. She'd scraped her cheeks against the ground. And all of Shibuya was in a panic. The buildings looked like they could fall down at any moment. A car had smashed into a store and was giving off black smoke. Everyone in Shibuya was running to the station in search of a way out. It was hard for tiny little Hina to go into the crowd against the crowd, and she was almost pushed down many times as she headed for home. She didn't honestly remember how long it took her to get back to the condo where she lived, or what was left of it. She just remembered that she felt so tired. But when she saw her condo building, all that exhaustion vanished. The building hadn't collapsed, but it was tilting and looked like it could fall over at any time. The people who escaped inside were standing a good ways away and were looking up at it. Some people tried to go inside to get their valuables, others tried to stop them. She saw her parents there.
Hinae, 無事だったのか?
Maybe they'd happened to come home early, or maybe they'd raced over here after the earthquake. Either way, they were injured, but alright. There was someone missing. Someone important. She looked around and didn't see him. Her parents didn't answer, but she could tell where her brother was from where her mum was looking. The apartment complex. The condo building was tilted and could fall over at any time. Who knew what was going on inside?
Hinae.
Her father slowly shook his head.
お兄ちゃんはもうひなえ、ひなえ、ダメよ、ひなえ
She dodged past her father's outstretched hands and ran into the building. Of course the elevator didn't work. She ran up the stairs, which were only barely still functional, and headed for her condo. All the exhaustion she'd felt was totally gone. All she was thinking about was her brother, Shingo. All she wanted was for him to be safe. But it was not to be. Their condo was a disaster. There was no sign of the life they'd lived. But that didn't matter to her. She screamed. Again and again. She heard a small moan from under the rubble. She ran over and saw her brother, who was apparently still... He was alive.
Hina, よかった。無事だったのか。
Her brother was alive. She swallowed her words. Her brother's body was half buried under rubble, and he couldn't move. She tried to lift it off, but she was far too weak to even budge it.
無理だ、ヒナ。それよりお前は逃げろ。ここももう。
She tried so hard to move the rubble that her nails broke and blood began to drip from her fingers. But she still kept trying. Her mum and dad had betrayed her. The one bond she had, the one truth she had, was her brother. It was the one thing that kept her going. But...
ごめん、ヒナ。違うんだ。
She didn't know why her brother was suddenly apologizing.
僕たちは兄弟なんかじゃない。 お前と僕は本当は純粋な兄弟なんかじゃないんだ。
It was a sudden confession. What was he talking about? They weren't brother and sister? What did he mean? He kept talking, even though Hinae didn't understand what he was saying.
ひな、お前は母さんと父さんの子じゃない。別の男との間の子だ。
嘘。
Suddenly the whole world went black.
ずっと言うべきじゃないって思ってた。隠しておくべきだって。お前が大きくなるまでは。でももう俺はだから。
In other words,
ごめん、ひな。ずっと隠していて。
in other words, Hinae Arimoto really was very similar to Takuru Miyashiro in many ways. It was a shock. She wasn't her mum and dad's daughter. Her brother wasn't her real brother. But the biggest shock to Hinae was that her brother had been lying to her. After all the times he told her not to lie. He said he wouldn't lie to her anymore, but he'd been concealing something so important. She couldn't believe it. It was a cry from her heart. And that's when it happened. And then she saw something in the corner of her eye. It was twisted and beautiful. It was like some kind of enchanting creature, but cold, like something inorganic. Something like a sword, but unlike any sword in existence.
ごめん、ひな。でもこれは本当のことなんだ。
Suddenly, she knew he was telling the truth. It wasn't just intuition. She knew. She knew somehow. For some reason, she knew his words were true. As she stood there in shock, suddenly she was knocked backward and almost fell to her feet. The building was collapsing. There was truth in his cry. She staggered back just as the roof in front of her fell in. The dust rose up so thick she couldn't even see her brother anymore. Those were the last words she ever heard him say. And now we're back in the present again, October 26th, 2015. Monday. Which is where we're going to end this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Child, and when we return, adventurers, hopefully we shall find some information about our mystery fifth victim, who this time isn't Riko Haida, but someone completely different. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.